Object relations and neurological vulnerability. How internal worlds are built on fragile foundations. The brain's early architecture, particularly the anterior insular cortex and the right hemisphere, develops in response to attuned mirroring, emotional regulation, and caregiver availability. Shore, 1994. The right anterior insular cortex, dominant in early years, integrates bodily states with affect, the foundation of self awareness, empathy, and emotional safety. The left anterior insular cortex and prefrontal systems, maturing past the age of 5, handle narrative construction, cognitive regulation, and repression. When trauma, neglect, enmeshment, or misattunement occurs during this pre verbal development window, two key consequences emerge. One, impaired regulation in the right anterior insular cortex, equaling disconnection from internal states. 2. Fragmented object competency, equaling the bad object cannot be integrated into a coherent self image or other image. Object relations theory asserts that the child internalizes relationships as mental structures, not as people per se, but emotional patterns of being with people. These are called internal objects. In a healthy system, the child internalizes both good and bad objects, which become modulated over time into stable representations. In trauma, particularly in narcissistic family, the child is often faced with a withdrawing object, neglect, or an invasive object, enmeshment, like a narcissistic parent, but never a consistently attuned object. So the result, the child doesn't internalize the bad object and avoid it. The child becomes the bad object in order to survive. Ego splitting, misrecognition, and the shared fantasy. The Lacanian misrecognition enters here. The child sees a reflection of himself in the mother's gaze or symbolic mirror. That is not accurate. But the child needs that reflection to organize his ego. In narcissistic dynamics, the narcissist builds a false self from a distorted early gaze, idealized or withdrawn, but never reflective of the authentic infant. The survivor, when idealized later in life, is used as a mirror pulled into the narcissist's psychic system to stabilize the narcissist's internal fragmentation. Neurologically, this manifests as hyperactivation of the survivor's right anterior insular cortex, processing intense emotional stimuli without coherent meaning. So we have a collapse of narrative regulation in the left brain. The survivor can feel but cannot explain or integrate. Why object relations still matter in a brain based world. Modern neuropsychology, e.g., insular function, connectivity loss, synaptic pruning, doesn't replace object relations. It confirms and extends them. Internal objects are not abstractions, they are neural patterns of expectations. What happens when I reach out? What happens when I love? What happens when I'm seen? In the narcissist, early failure to integrate object constancy results in splitting, idealization and devaluation, cold empathy, emotional simulation without identification, anticathexis, psychic energy directed towards repression, not connection. In the survivor, being drawn into the shared fantasy triggers a return to early object relations patterns. Regress states confusion between self and other, and over identification with the narcissist gaze. Object relations do not form in isolation. They emerge with a neurobiological matrix shaped by early affective attunement or its absence, reflexive mirroring patterns, functional connectivity in limbic prefrontal insula networks. A single structural defect, for example the right anterior insular cortex atrophy, may predispose a disorder. but it is the object relational matrix that determines what kind of disorder emerges. A child with impaired right anterior insular cortex plus cold mirroring equals a narcissistic structure. A child with intact empathy plus relational invalidation equals a collapsing survivor structure. Both are driven by trauma, but one adopts by controlling the mirror, while the other seeks it out in desperation. Mirrored psychic inversion theory captures this dual dynamic. Narcissistic mirroring, cold empathy, hijacks the survivor's internal object field. This induces symbolic collapse, where the survivor misrecognizes himself through the narcissist's gaze, just as a narcissist once did through theirs. Thus, the disorder isn't just in the brain, it's in the mirroring system, symbolic, emotional, and neurological, that built the internal world from the beginning.